of the work plan and extend the time frame associated with interim regulations for temporary homeless encampments. And I think Rebecca and Kevin may tag team on this presentation.
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to give you the general description of the code amendments before you, and then more specific questions I will defer to our city attorney, Kevin Rogerson. So what I wanted to go over tonight was basically background, what are homeless encampments, why are we as the city regulating this, provide an overview of the regulations that are contained in the ordinance before you, and then of course give you the staff recommendation. As you'll recall, in January of this year, City Council adopted ordinance 3707, adopting interim regulations. I did put here through a moratorium, but that is my bad. Our city attorney has corrected me tonight, and that's true. I tend to say that just because of the statute that allows us to do this also deals with moratoriums. So we are not instituting a moratorium. We've adopted interim development regulations through that statute. So after we enacted ordinance, or City Council adopted ordinance 3707, following that, within 60 days of that ordinance, came back to City Council and you adopted ordinance 3710. Continued those interim regulations in place. So what are homeless encampments? This is something that I've been asked quite a bit, had emails and phone calls from different members of the public, so I thought I would add this slide here. So what the interim regulations define these as, it's an encampment for homeless persons that's on property owned or controlled by a religious organization, whether within buildings located on the property or elsewhere on the property outside of buildings. So these types of encampments can be inside a building or outside of a building, but does need to be on property owned or controlled by a religious organization. So thought I'd give you a few pictures because this is part of the question of what people ask me, and they'll say, do you mean tent cities? I'll say, yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. So just to hit home of what are we talking about when we talk about homeless encampments. This isn't everything that this ordinance would regulate, but in general, this is what we're talking about. These are two different tent cities that have been set up in the city of Seattle. And why is the city regulating these? Is another question I've got. Why would we be putting in place interim regulations? So when we look at the ordinance, really what we really have to hit home, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we're protecting the public health and safety, number one, but at the same time, and this is right out of the purpose section of this code, not substantially burdening decisions or actions of religious organizations that wish to provide shelter to the homeless. And that's a legal issue that Kevin can speak more to of why that's important, that we are not burdening those types of organizations. And we know, because this isn't an issue that just the city of Mount Vernon is dealing with, there are cities all across the country that are dealing with these issues. And so we are very well aware of the issues that we could potentially be facing. There's been a lot of lessons learned where other encampments have been established. Drug use, drug paraphernalia, garbage, unsanitary conditions. In addition to, you can, I'm sure, imagine the neighbors when these facilities go up next to somebody's neighborhood, how concerned they are, and the number of complaints any city would get. With regard to some of these effects, pictures of both of these are in Seattle in 2016. This is why we want to regulate this. We want to make sure that we don't have this. happen anywhere in the city with those types of encampments. We want to make sure that we have regulations in place for garbage disposal, sanitary waste, those types of things. That's what these interim regulations are doing. These are actually both in California. Again, the negative impacts. Why would the city be wanting to adopt regulations? It can frankly be very, very impactful to a community with these types of uses. So in general, and of course you have the ordinance in front of you, and there's quite a bit of code in there, but as a general overview, what this does is the interim regulations state that homeless encampments are only allowed on property that's owned or controlled by a religious organization, and they need to be acting as the host, the sponsor, or both. We're going to require that they apply for a permit, and that when they do come in for a permit, the city will be providing notice to the neighbors, not just the abutting neighbors, and not just the standard 300 feet we see with other land use actions. These regulations actually require notice to those within 600 feet of a proposed homeless encampment, and it's what we call a type 2 permit, similar to a type 2 road. That explain what that is that just means is that it is administratively approved. So our department could approve this if somebody met all the permit conditions, but it could be appealed to a hearing examiner should either the applicant or a neighbor want to file an appeal. We would require that the homeless encampment demonstrate that there are adequate provisions for drinking water, disposal of human waste, and disposal of garbage. It has where the ordinance states that there's a maximum occupancy of 100 people, and no one under the age of 18 would be allowed. And the last item that I've noted here is that a homeless encampment would be allowed for no more than 90 days on any given property in a calendar year. And then if we were looking between calendar years, there has to be a minimum of 120 days that lapses before a homeless encampment could be sited again on that same piece of property. So the development regulations that are in the ordinance before council are exactly the same ones that were contained in the ordinance in January. There's been no changes to those. The addition to the ordinance that's before you is that staff, we have included a proposed work plan that was not previously proposed. This is a type of a code amendment that there is a lot of outreach and a learning curve on staff's part to make sure that we are fully aware of the impacts and needs. And so we really have to make sure that before we propose permanent regulations, we do everything we can to reach out to different organizations and to get this right. And as such, staff is recommending that you approve the ordinance that's in front of you with regard to temporary homeless encampments.
Great. Any questions for Rebecca before we open up public hearing regarding this? I know there was at least one particular email that had been sent in to council asking a couple of questions that Kevin is able to address, so I don't